Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Durham District School Board of Trustees, I would like to welcome you to the Standing Committee meeting of Monday, November 1st, 2021. I want to take a moment to acknowledge and reflect on the tragic accident that occurred a week ago in Brock Township that involves students attending multiple schools, and to express our community's shared collective grief on the passing of a student attending Brock High School. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I want to convey our sincere condolences to the student's family and the entire Brock High School community. I know that I speak for all my colleagues here tonight when I say that our thoughts are with the other students involved, their families and school communities, as we wish them all a speedy and fulsome recovery. Our school teams continue to be available to provide support, and any students or families impacted by this tragedy can reach out for help by talking to a teacher, school administrator, or through the Connect with Our Mental Health Team button on our website. Thank you. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight? Seeing none. The agenda then is approved as distributed. I see that we have no community presentations tonight, so we'll proceed to our Durham District School Board presentation. And before I call on Superintendent Nigro to introduce the group, I'll just take a moment so that we can build our virtual stage.
Sorry, we don't need virtual at this point.
All right, so through you, Madam Chair, there's nothing more heartwarming than to see our students put their learning to good use to address a cause that is worthwhile and makes change. Tonight, we will hear from an extraordinary group of students from Ddsb at Home. They have been recognized for this extraordinary work, most recently winning the grand prize in a national competition, the Our Canada Project from Learning for a Sustainable Future. I'd like to now introduce you to teacher Allison Elwood and the Duffin Defenders.
Good evening. My name is Pranav, and I'm one of the Duffin's Defenders. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak about our project this evening. Last year, our grade 7 class made a documentary about our concerns with the proposed development on the Duffins Creek wetland in Pickering. Our journey began after reading an article, and we were discussing different perspectives. At first, we found it tough to decide whether or not the development was a good idea. Our questions led to research, and then more questions, and finally, we took action. We are proud to report that the developers and City Council reviewed their proposals, and the location will remain a wetland that will help reduce flooding, provide habitat for life, and continue to protect the water we drink. Here's a bit about what we learned.
I learned about watersheds and the decision-making process. There are people who have big roles in making choices for our environment, something that impacts everyone.
I learned that a lot of wildlife is being destroyed and that there's a lot of people working to save wildlife every day. I also learned the importance of wetlands, and why we need to protect them. They protect us from flooding and clean the water.
I learned that the government does not always choose the best solution.
I learned about First Nations and reconciliation.
I learned that MZOs can be used for good and bad to help the environment as well as to destroy it. I also learned that it can be used to make decisions that the people want as well as to make decisions without the voice of the people.
I've learned how the government works and how decisions are made in the legislative system. I also learned how important Duffins Creek wetland is to our community. Here's a little bit about how being part of this project made us feel.
When important people wrote back to us and came to talk to our class, it made me feel proud.
It made me feel proud and important because I used my voice to make a change. We helped to voice concerns of the public and the Mississaugas of Scugog Island.
It definitely made me feel important. I also felt happy and accomplished afterward.
Interviewing, researching, and taking action to save a wetland made me feel accomplished and great because I like feeling part of my community.
It made me feel important because I was making a difference.
There were a lot of people that helped make our project happen. We are grateful to all the people who responded to our letters and joined our class for interviews so we can learn firsthand their point of view. Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation Chief Kelly LaRocca, Green Party leader Annemie Powell, and Steve Heikert, and the folks from the TRCA, Mark Ginto from the City of Pickering, and Tim Gray from Environmental Defense. Their generosity with their time, sharing their expertise, taught us so much. We learned to code and how to create storytelling map of S3 volunteer Connor Houston, who also hosted our website. Hundreds of students listened to our story and helped us write letters and join our case. Retired Ddsb teacher Dave Gordon and his students Devin and Ali inspired us with their activism and showed us how to make a real difference. We are grateful to MPP and Green Party leader Mike Schreiner for speaking to us and reading our petition in the Ontario Legislature. Ddsb Innovative Technology facilitators Ryan Adams and Aaron Peterson taught us how to use VVideo. We are grateful to Learning for a Sustainable Future and the Our Canada Project for the guidance, workshops, and inspiration, and for organizing this opportunity that allowed us to put our learning into action. We are humbled by the award and plan to put the prize money to good use. We'd also like to thank the Mayor and Council of the City of Pickering for withdrawing the MZO and saving the wetland. The work is not over. We look forward to continuing to unpave the way to a sustainable future. It was an amazing experience. We will never forget it.
Thank you again for having us. Here's a shortened version of our documentary.
We are a concerned group of grade 7 students who are worried about the recent events that have happened to the Duffins Creek wetland in Pickering, Ontario. We read an article back in October 2020 about a proposed warehouse development on a wetland connected to Duffins Creek, and it caught our attention. So we decided to look further into this issue and see what we could learn.
Hello everybody, and right now I'm sitting on the Duffins Creek wetland. The main issue is that this piece of land I'm standing on, it doesn't look like much, but it turns out that this is a wetland key to the health of our Duffins Creek watershed. The city of Pickering and the region of Durham must build an Amazon warehouse, one of the biggest in Canada, as well as a parking lot. They asked for special permission to build here using an MZO from the provincial government, and they were given the go-ahead. However, many people are upset about this decision.
Wetlands are key to our environment. They provide a habitat to migratory birds, fish, and amphibians. They help combat climate change by capturing carbon. They filter rainwater and protect our rivers and lakes from erosion. This prevents water pollution and protects marine life.
After hearing about the overall importance of wetlands, not only for the wildlife that rely on the area, but also for our own health and safety, we wondered why anyone would want to pave over it. So we wrote a letter to the mayor of Pickering, David Ryan. Mayor Ryan was the one who asked the provincial government for special permission to build the warehouse and parking lot in this location. Ryan Ginto, the manager of public affairs, came to our virtual class for an interview on behalf of Mayor Ryan.
We learned from other interviews that there were, I think, 3 other places that this warehouse could be built. Why specifically did you choose Duffins Creek?
They wanted to be off of the highway, off of Highway 401. So the warehouse, it's going to create 2,000 jobs. So those 2,000 jobs, they're not jobs that can be done remotely. So when people are able to work closer to home, it's better for the environment.
We had a chance to talk with an urban planner working for the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, TRCA, Steve Heikert.
I have never been in a situation where there has been a request to remove such a large provincially significant wetland. Usually the wetlands are off limits.
How can the City of Pickering get around the fact that this is a protected wetland? Why would they want to do that?
So the city council decided that they wanted to change that component of their plan because they apparently felt that the warehouse development was more important to them than the wetland. And so they asked the province of Ontario through one of their ministers or the members of provincial parliament to make a decision to change the zoning on the property to now allow for the warehouse.
It turns out that the key to the dispute is something called an MZO, or Minister's Zoning Order.
But what is an MZO?
When you want to build something, you need to go through the TRCA and public consultation. If the government were to use the normal procedure, they would have to go through the TRCA, who would say no to the development, since the wetland is an important part of the environment. Using an MZO, the government was able to avoid the TRCA and go directly to the building. Second, because of COVID-19, the government hid behind the fact that COVID had destroyed the economy, and using an MZO, they say they can rebuild it.
We know the land in question is part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, so we reached out to Chief Kelly LaRocca for her opinion on the matter.
So the Canadian Constitution says, as part of it, that it owes a duty of consultation for Aboriginal and treaty right infringement. It has to consult the Indigenous communities across Canada if it is going to develop on or change the constitution of any Indigenous, Aboriginal, and treaty rights. So what does that mean? Well, it means they have to talk to us. Wetlands are a non-renewable resource. That's why the First Nations of the Williams Treaties feel that it's so important that we would be consulted on the transaction, because we would have told the Conservation Authority that. We would have told that to the Pickering Council, and we definitely would have told that to the province.
It was clear that we felt that the wetland was worth saving. Not only is it an important part of our environment, but it was rezoned without the consultation of local First Nations, and the MZO seemed like a way to cheat the system and ignore the voices of the citizens.
It was important to let people know not only about the wetland that was in danger of being paved over, but also about the missing voices of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, who had a constitutional right to be consulted. We wrote a petition to ask our MPPs to remove the MZO from the Duffins Creek wetland and to stop the development.
We even got MPP Mike Shiner to read our petition in the Legislative Assembly.
Allison Elwoods, Durham District School Board Grade 7 virtual class, for sending me this petition. Therefore, we, the undersigned, petition the Legislative Assembly of Ontario to revoke the MZO and stop the warehouse development on provincially significant Duffins Creek wetland. I fully support this petition. We'll sign it and send it to the table.
We were pretty pumped out about that, but then the news started coming in. It turns out that it was actually Amazon that wanted to build the warehouse, and because of rising public pressure from actions like ours, they were no longer interested. And then came the news that the City of Pickering was going to withdraw the MZO for the area. We attended the City Council meeting just to be sure, and it actually happened. They asked the province to repeal the part of the MZO that included the warehouse, and they promised to reach out to discuss the issue with the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations. The wetland was saved. We couldn't believe it. We actually saved the Duffins Creek wetland.
It was not all good news. Because of this project, we learned that wetlands all over Ontario are being developed at an alarming rate, and First Nation voices continue to be ignored. We also learned that MZOs are being used to fast-track development projects over the science and the voices of the people. If you hear of an MZO that is being used in your area, get the facts. Write to your local First Nations and see what they think. Write to your elected representatives and make your voices heard. After all, once a wetland is paved over, it cannot be unpaved. They are lost forever.
And this concludes the presentation. I just want Allison to open her mic and just say hello so you see the teacher that led this project. And so Allison, can you just open your mic?
Hello, I'm lucky enough to be the classroom teacher for these young people. Thank you very much for having us tonight.
Thank you, Allison, and happy to take any questions or comments that you may have. So over to the chair to manage that.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to begin tonight with Trustee Edwards. Go ahead, Donna.
First of all, I want to say congratulations. And I've never been so proud of some students who've managed to make a change. They've managed to make a change that the adults in the area have not been able to do. It's because of your advocacy and your great work, and that has managed to make a significant change. Now, what we need to do is get you on the whole phosphorus thing around the lake as well, because it's amazing what you've managed to accomplish. And as I said, I'm so proud of you. And based on that, I'm just thinking that there's a provincial election coming up. Have you been able to maybe talk to your parents, or have they changed their views on politics and so forth from the advocacy that you have managed and the fact that they could make a change too?
What do you think, Pranav? Do you want to field that one?
Okay, so we did a survey. So we did a presentation with all the parents and everything some time ago, back in when we were in grade 7. And we did a survey before, like a pre-survey, and then we did the presentation and then an after survey. So before the survey, there were not a lot of people who thought they could make a difference. And then after the survey, including parents and like adults and everything, they thought they could make a difference, a huge difference after our presentation. So yes, it's completely changed.
That's amazing. And I'm looking forward to you continuing on doing and advocating for the wetlands, because it's, as you said, wetlands are being destroyed across Ontario, but specifically in our community. I'm glad that you're on our side.
Thank you, Pranav and Trustee Edwards. I'd like to then go to Trustee Forbes. Go ahead, Darlene.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. I just am so impressed, and I wanted to let you know that I stand in solidarity with you. I marched in, I took part in the big protest march through Pickering in March, in the month of March. So I don't know if you were there, but it was very well attended, and so I'm your video, your advocacy, it's just so it's amazing. So what you've learned, what you've articulated, and you're now in grade 8, like this is just wonderful. So I absolutely stand in solidarity with you, and I want to thank you for your amazing just from everything, and even Pranav, what you had said about the surveys of parents, and bravo, just congratulations, and congratulations to you, Ms. Elwood.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. And now to Trustee Lundquist. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. I don't have a lot to add because it's, I don't think anybody could have watched that and not been blown away by the fact that you have kids asking tough questions and demanding better from government. And I think that the lesson in that for everybody is that the smallest voices really can affect change. So thank you for demonstrating that for everyone, both at this table and everyone who was involved in the marches and all of the other advocacy that went hand in hand with yours. It is a remarkable achievement and you should all be so very proud. I'm confident that everybody at this table is.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist, for sure. And over to Trustee Morton. Chair Morton, go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher, and through you. I just want to reiterate what everyone around this table is saying and is thinking. Congratulations. This is an amazing way to make a difference. And for 12 and 13-year-olds to exercise their voice like this, it is so impressive. You are making a difference. So students, you maybe couldn't see the expression on your teacher's face when you were speaking, but Allison Elwood had this broad smile. She is so proud of you, and rightly so. We are all very proud. Thank you all and congratulations.
Thank you, Chair. And over to Trustee Crawford. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you and congratulations. I sort of cut my political career in Scarborough with Save the Rouge, and I would suggest you look it up because what it'll tell you is that it really helps to get involved, but it also has to be ongoing. It took about 15 years before that finally evolved in what it should have been. So good on you, and I'm expecting that Amazon probably wouldn't have backed off if it wasn't for the not the interference, but the intervention of people. And I thought, for instance, that wetlands were safe. Someone had said to me, that's wetlands, I would have assumed, yeah, we've saved those, but you know what? It never ends. So congratulations and stay on it.
Thank you, Trustee Crawford. So thank you to the Duffins Creek Defenders and to your teacher, Allison Elwood, who guided you to place first nationally in terms of a learning project on engaged Canadians. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You haven't seen the last of these students, I assure you.
And moving on to item 7 on your agenda, and we'll call on Director Marsh for an update.
Thank you, through you, Chair Thatcher. I'll begin with an update in terms of an area that I know has been of concern in terms of the operations with staff shortages. Want to acknowledge that there has been a tremendous amount of effort put forward in terms of alleviating some of the shortages that we had been previously experiencing. So while we still continue to have a shortage, it's not as extreme as it had been previously. So in terms of regular operations, our goal is that teachers will once again be getting their prep periods and not covering off for absent colleagues, and that we will start being able to do professional learning again in a more regular fashion, but we're not there yet. But certainly a tremendous amount of hiring has been done. Part of the process this year that did present a challenge for us, of course, is good news. And that was that our enrollment was above projections. So we did welcome almost 1,500 students above projection this year, which resulted in close to almost 500 permanent teaching jobs being offered. And so, of course, when you think about who you hire, most often if it's people who have been doing occasional teaching work previously. There have been shortages in other areas in terms of the education sector. We're continuing to fill those shortages as well. And just wanted to acknowledge the efforts of all staff in terms of making things work while we were in this challenging situation. One of the areas that has been drawn to our attention in terms of a strain on both staff and students is the quadmestering system. You may recall that Durham District School Board, that staff from the very beginning asked the Ministry of Education to allow us to be semestered. We continue to advocate for that quite regularly. We would like to return to semestered system in February, and it is probably the #1 question we are receiving from secondary students and their families is the desire, based on the impact of the quadmester, negative impact, and in particular citing well-being of their children. And we recognize as well it takes a toll on the well-being of staff. The Ministry of Education has indicated to us, and we advocate very regularly, that they're waiting to get the projections in terms of the modeling of what COVID cases may look like post the winter holiday. So wanted to bring the trustees up to date. Previously, they hadn't indicated to us that they were waiting on the modeling, but that was the response last week to us. It's really interesting when we look at Durham's situation. We have had very few COVID-19 cases in the secondary schools. We've had very few COVID cases overall, but at secondary in particular, I believe since the beginning of the school year, we've had 21, which is less than 1% of our secondary population. So just wanted to flag for you that really in terms of the strategies we have in place, management of COVID-19 has been very successful. And I would suggest that probably related as well to the high vaccination rate within the Durham region. So just wanted to let you know that update as well. Wanted to turn it over now to Superintendent Mundy, who will bring you up to date in terms of vaccination status and protocols within the district.
Thank you. So currently we have about 94% of our 10,543 staff fully vaccinated. We recently added the function to the attestation so that staff could upload their proof of vaccination. And we already have 54% that have completed and provided their vaccination receipt. And we'll continue to follow up with those additional ones as well. We have about 800 staff who are either not fully vaccinated or wish not to disclose that they are and that are required to complete the twice weekly rapid antigen testing. Just to note that just over 300 of these are supply staff that have not worked for us this school year. We are reaching out to confirm if these staff will be working with us this school year or not. With the removal of these staff that are not working, we have 96% completion of the educational required program. We continue as required by the Ministry of Education. We need to provide information weekly on rapid test completion to the Ministry of Health. We are continuing to monitor compliance on a weekly basis and following up appropriately. The Ministry of Education has recently provided updated information that as of November 10th, individuals subject to the testing requirements will be required to provide verification of a negative test result 3 times per week. So an increase over the twice weekly at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Superintendent Mundy. And just to close, I would say that despite the many challenges that the fall has brought, we are seeing incredible work happening in our classrooms. And I think that the presentation is indicative of the creative and innovative work that is happening for students across the district, and very much appreciate all of the efforts of staff to provide those opportunities for our board, which is a growing board, and really pleased by the number of new families that have chosen Durham District School Board this year. That concludes the report, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Marsh. I'm going to call on Trustee Barrett first. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. Just a quick question. I know that a couple of weeks ago or a couple of meetings ago, we had a parent from Oshawa come with regards to some staffing shortages in the French Immersion program. And I've heard again from a number of FI parents, and I recognize quite clearly that with the staffing shortages and a high demand for French Immersion, I recognize that there's some significant gaps across the province. I'm just wondering if we have had much success, and if there is some reassurance to French immersion parents on whether or not we've been successful in being able to retain teachers that have this skill set.
Well, thank you, and through you, Chair. Yes, we have, it is a concern across the province, as you know, ensuring that we have qualified French teachers. We have had some success through our uncertified French posting. So we have been able to add some individuals into long-term positions with letter of permissions. So that has assisted in some of those specific incidences that you had spoken to before. But it is an ongoing piece, and we will be continuing to investigate more, French qualified, and also look at permanent pool hiring as we move into the spring.
Just a very quick supplementary, if I could, Chair Thatcher.
Yes, of course.
Okay, I appreciate it. And I appreciate Superintendent Mundy, and certainly having multiple French immersion kids in my family, and knowing that many of their friends are graduating this year with teaching degrees after their completion of their second year. I certainly would encourage, as you have already mentioned is going to be part of the strategy, is for early pool hiring, because many of these kids want to stay in Durham. They grew up in Durham, and we need to get them before some other board, like that nasty Ottawa Carleton board, hires them prior to us. They are Durham French immersion trained and wanting to remain in the community, and it would be nice to be able to pool them quickly and early. So I'll leave that with you, Superintendent Mundy. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Mundy and Trustee Barrett. Over to Trustee Stone. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. Just wondering, Superintendent Mundy, what days now are staff required to test?
So with the, currently the suggestion was Sundays and Wednesdays for the 2 days as per the twice weekly. When we move into 3 times per week, we're not defining the specific days, because basically it's every other day would obviously make the most sense. Staff will be uploading their information each time they test, rather than on a weekly basis, because we're required to submit information on daily test results, not just weekly.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Stone and Superintendent Mundy. I'm seeing no further questions or comments. So I'm going to move on in the agenda to recommended action and call on Trustee Barrett to discuss the in-person board meetings.
Yes, thank you, Chair Thatcher. I wanted to be able to place this on the agenda tonight for conversation and determining whether or not there is indeed recommended action. I recognize that many industry, government offices, etc., are beginning to go back to in-person meetings, etc. I myself, my organization has also started to migrate back in a hybrid sort of fashion. I understand that there are still some very significant protocols and restrictions that must still be followed. Social distancing, masking, etc. But wondering if it is not time for our board to be able to continue to be able to consider returning back in person, at least in some hybrid fashion. I'm recognizing that there may be individuals that still feel uncomfortable being able to do that, and I would suggest that we should not be forcing individuals to be able to do that, and that we would at least be able to come up with some sort of a hybrid type of process. I think that as leaders within the organization, that expecting both our children and staff to be in schools, that I think that we also have to be able to understand, without compromising our personal health, without compromising our own beliefs and restrictions. I still think that that's important. I'm not even suggesting that we go back completely, like with committee meetings. I still think that committee meetings, et cetera, could still be held virtually, but at least the one board meeting that we have on a monthly basis might be something that we could actually start at, and we could start slow as we begin to be able to come back in a hybrid fashion, because I still want to be able to respect people's positions. And I do recognize that from staff, whether it's from the director or others, that there would still be restrictions, that we probably have to be able to understand what those restrictions may be. But whether or not it is not something that as a board that we should be discussing on whether or not when this might take place. I understand that the virtual meeting mandate, I think Don Edwards says it extends till November of 2022, I think, or something within that perspective. That I may not think that's the best methodology, but just wondering whether or not there's an opportunity, Chair Thatcher, for a conversation as a board, what the next steps might be for us as a board. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's call on Trustee Crawford. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's good to have a discussion about this, but this is not in our hands anyway. This is part of the Education Act, and they've already indicated what we're supposed to be doing. And I guess until they change that, we won't be able to do anything. But as far as comparing personal meetings with virtual meetings, it's my opinion that the virtual meetings work very, very well. And there's probably more people tuning into them than there would be the personal meetings, even though they are broadcast. So until the government changes the Education Act and sends us notice, then maybe at that time we can have a discussion about it. Not that I'm trying to curb discussion. Everybody should have a say in this, but for me, virtual works very well.
Thank you, Trustee Crawford. And Trustee Barrett. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know of anything in the Education Act that precludes us from being able to return. There are many other school boards across the province that have begun at least the hybrid model on being able to return. I believe that it's a choice to each individual school board to determine what they want to be able to do. Pushing one way or the other, I think there needs to be a conversation, but I don't believe there's anything that is precluding us in the Education Act or in a directive that says that we cannot meet in person, except for the protocols of the Ministry of Health that says that we have to operate within the guidelines and the local guidelines on being able to meet as we have to follow the protocols of our local health unit as well.
Trustee Barrett, I believe that Director Marsh has received some updates on protocol. So I'll go to Director Marsh.
If that's helpful, just to clarify, so the Ministry of Education never prevented us from, well, they have in the past prevented us from meeting in person, but this year we were able to meet in person, but we did have to follow the direction of DRHD. When the province opened things up in terms of opening more up at the end of October, we approached DRHD to ask them if that changed anything in terms of our operations. And so last Friday, Associate Director Markovsky did receive an update to them in terms of those safety protocols that we would have to follow should the board wish to meet. And so I'm happy to turn it over to Associate Director Markovsky if that's relevant to your conversation right now, and if people would like to hear the updated protocols.
Thank you, for sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher, and just to build on Director Marsh's comments, we did, as she mentioned, connect with our board contact from the Durham Region Health Department last week, and we have received confirmation that in-person meetings are feasible now with the updated guidance, as long as the requirements, and they mentioned 4 things: active screening, Vaccination verification, masking, and physical distancing are maintained. So in terms of active screening, we do have a standard screening tool that we would be utilizing. For masking during meetings, it would be encouraged that masks are obviously worn, and they can be removed even while you're speaking, but there needs to be at least 2 meters apart between each individual. So that's really the key piece that they highlighted there, is that 2 meters needs to be maintained between each individual. And while you're speaking, you can remove the mask if you so choose, although they are encouraged. I just touched on the 2 meter physical distancing. And in terms of the vaccination verification, we would, trustees and any board employee, because it would be an internal meeting, would be subject to the same requirements under our vaccination disclosure policy. So that way, if you are not fully vaccinated, you would still be required to complete the rapid testing prior to attending the meeting. That's really the 4 pieces that they touched on, but other than that, they did confirm that in-person meetings are feasible. I should share with you too, although we're talking about board meetings within the education center, it's worth noting that masking requirements in our schools are still mandatory for all staff, students, and visitors, obviously subject to any limited exemptions. All staff and trustees in this case are required to be in compliance with the ministry's vaccination disclosure and testing policy as well. I just wanted to delineate between being in schools and being at the Ed Center for a board meeting, but that's pretty much the update that was received from DRHD last week.
Thank you, Associate Director and Director Marsh. I'm going to go over to Trustee Lundquist. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you. So I don't have any fundamental opposition because I don't see, like, we can hold hybrid meetings, right? So for people who are comfortable going, they go. For people who are uncomfortable or have health implications or for whatever reason just don't have that level of comfort that puts them in, I admit I have some discomfort at the idea of being in a space with people who go about, like, I'm sure you're all lovely, but I don't know what you're doing in your lives, right? And so, like, the idea that I'm going to expose myself as somebody who's high risk is concerning, but that as long as I can participate, I could care less. I mean, that's not the right phrasing, but I'm quite content to have people attend if that is what the preference is, and there's no impediment either by the ministry or by the Durham Region Health Department. To me, like, why wouldn't we do it that way?
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. And Chair Morton, go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. One question for Associate Director Markowski. You didn't mention the number of individuals that we could have in the boardroom. At one point in August, I think the number was a limitation of 25. Do we still have that restriction?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher, that's a great question, Trustee Morton. So really there is no more capacity limit. The key piece there is 2 meters apart. So however many individuals you could fit into a space, with the 2 meters distance between each individual, you could fit into that space. There isn't a capacity limit. And I actually asked that specific question, that was clarified.
Thank you. I'm recalling meetings that we had from August to December of 2020, and we were masked in the boardroom. We had all superintendents, we had the majority of trustees, and the spacing, I'm sure we each had 2 meters. So I would be very much in favor of going back into the boardroom, knowing that our students and our teachers are in class. I do not object to going back into the Ed Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Crawford, you have spoken to this. I think I'll just go to Trustee Templeton and I'll come back to you in a moment. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. I guess I'm in agreement with Carolyn and Nikki. We just started up theater shows, and of course, they're still socially distanced inside. Everybody has to wear a mask. So, because I'm around all these people, for myself, I don't think I want to put anybody else at risk. So I'm in favor of keeping it both. If you're comfortable going to the board meeting, by all means go. But I myself would prefer to be, I'd be on the safe side and I'd be virtual for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Trustee Crawford, go ahead, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. When I referred to the Education Act, I was talking about the changes that they made when they, at one time, it was necessary for us to go to board meetings. In fact, if we missed 3 board meetings, we would lose our position. They removed that part of it from the Education Act, or at least softened it. So I apologize, Trustee Barrett. I didn't mean to throw the Education Act at you totally. One of the things I would like to have seen when I noticed this item on the agenda, I thought, well, it's brand new and Trustee Barrett is going to introduce something, but it appears that there was information that we could have had on the agenda or prior to this meeting, which we have done before, and that would have been helpful to me to have that information. And I hope it'll be published and given to us after. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Crawford. Wondering, Trustee Barrett, yes, I was just wondering if you had a comment or something you'd like to add at this point.
Yeah, and I appreciate Trustee Crawford's comments, because it was never, and I don't think it's in the Education Act. I think it's a procedure, but regardless of where it is, I believe that it was long overdue that the ministry recognized that not attending virtually was somehow a sin on not doing that. So it was a long overdue change. But what I was going to do, in recognizing that it has to go to board anyway, Trustee Thatcher, I was going to make a motion that the Durham District School Board move to a hybrid model of in-person virtual meetings for board meetings only, commencing upon, I'm going to say is January 2022, because obviously if it goes to the board meeting in November and then it, then there's the board meeting in December. So I'm just going to suggest that the motion would be to be able to look at a hybrid, and I'm talking the choice, so that each individual has the right to be able to make the choice. So that the Durham District School Board consider moving to a hybrid model of in-person and virtual board meetings commencing in January of 2022. And then in brackets, you can have it recognizing and adhering to all health recommendations by both the province and the local health unit, close bracket.
Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Trustee Morton. Discussion. Trustee Edwards, go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, I agree with that motion. And just for people's awareness, it's an Ontario regulation 463/97, which basically gave the ability for boards to meet electronically. And as I said, it is revoked. Is for November 15th, 2022. So it was a regulation that allowed us to do that. And I have no problem with the motion as far as it would be individual trustees' choice.
Thank you. And Trustee Lundquist, go ahead, Nikki.
This is awkward now because we're in the middle of the discussion of the motion, and I just wondered if there's any objection from staff about it, because they're the ones where we're going to be coming into that space. So I guess it doesn't matter at this stage based on the timing of things, Christine. So thank you. I presume if there was an objection, it would have been articulated. So I'm going to just presume there's not, and I'm fine with it as is then.
Are you comfortable, Director Marsh, speaking on behalf of the senior team?
Yeah, we're all good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, it is moved and seconded that the Durham District School Board move to a hybrid model in person and virtual, beginning January 2022 with board meetings only in brackets and adhering to all health requirements. That close enough, Trustee Barrett?
Yes, but if I could just add one thing, if I could, just to close the motion. Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, because I want to be able to touch base on Trustee Lundquist's comments, and certainly we're talking, and I would expect and certainly understand that as director, Nora, that you would determine on whether or not there is a requirement to have all of your staff here or a handful of staff, that would be within your parameter and within the scope. Because you don't need all of your staff here, then you should be able to have that right. And I'm not sure, Nikki, if that's where you're going, but I would certainly support that fully, because you make that decision. So so I know it's not in the motion, but certainly that's not my intention that 3 trustees come in and we have 15 staff members here. I would leave that responsibility, accountability, and decision to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Barrett. All right. I'm going to ask if there are any objections to this motion. If you would please raise your hand if you have an objection.
Sorry, Chair. I think we're moving to the stadium seating for the vote. Is that correct?
If necessary, Trustee Forbes, I will.
Okay.
And I just wanted to see if there were any objections to this so far. Seeing 1, 2. Okay. Seeing 2 objections only, so the motion carries. Moving on to
Madam Chair, if I may, if there was an objection, then I think we should go to a vote. This is not a notice of motion to come to the board. This is a motion that's in front of us that's going to go to the board with a vote for or against it.
Yes, happy to do it. So all in favor, would you please go to your reactions and either choose the green check mark. If you're in favor, green check mark, please. So I have 6. I'm just going to wait a moment. I have 7 in favor and 2 opposed. Motion carries.
Madam, sorry, just a point of order. Would a vote against the motion not be indicated by a red X and an abstaining perhaps be no reaction? I just would like a clarification on that.
Yes, okay, I can do that. So if you are opposed, then would you indicate that with a red X? And 2 opposed. 7 in favor, 2 opposed, motion carries. All right, moving on then to item 9 on your agenda. And I'd like to call on our student trustees for their report. James Kay, Demario Knowles, and Kayla Malcolm. Who's beginning this evening?
I will be.
Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. The month of October has been proactive for all schools as well as our Student Senate. We held our symposium Monday, October 18th with our student senators, and we're amazed by the ideas that they had ready to share. Excitingly, this year we have senators from grades 9 to 12, which we've never had before. And we had superintendents and advisors join our symposium, and they got the chance to see the faces of our new senators, as well as listen to some of their thoughts and ideas that they had for this year. During the symposium, we split into our student success, equity, and student voice working groups, as well as our regional groups. These groups brainstormed ideas to address barriers students are facing. And overall, we believe that our student symposium was a success and are looking forward to working alongside the student senators this year.
We would now like to touch on what the working group discussed during our Senate symposium.
Each working group discussed ideas and used Jamboards to complete activities and/or questions.
The senators in the Student Success Working Group provided their thoughts on what student success looks like to them. Many senators believe student success is about personal growth and setting tangible goals while taking the steps necessary to achieve those goals. Additionally, senators brainstormed potential initiatives for the year and ideas for the redefining student success document we intend on developing.
The Student Voice Working Group discussed their ideas around student voice. We discussed whose voices are heard, whose are ignored, and whose need to be taken more into consideration. They also got the chance to explain what their definition of the subject was. I can't wait to hear their ideas for change in student voice.
The Equity Working Group discussed their personal definition of equity and brainstormed initiatives to work on this school year. The common point that was mentioned among the majority of the senators was ensuring that every student is valued, has equal opportunities and resources, can freely express themselves how they choose, and can achieve their personal goals without any disadvantages. Some of the initiatives that the senators wanted to execute include creating a Google form for students that allows them to express any issues that they may have, and providing resources that will aid students with post-secondary research and applications. Moving forward, during regional breakout groups, the members of the East region met to discuss regional concerns. One concern shared by many students in grade 11 is that they're stressed over the requirement to complete the OSSLT with very little time to study. The unique circumstances of the past 2 academic school years has left many students feeling unprepared to successfully complete the OSSLT requirements.
The Western Regional Breakout discussed some highlights and concerns at our schools. Senators from each high school had a turn to speak about recent events that were run within the past month, the outcome from students, and the concerns that the students are mentioning as well. One concern that the majority of schools had was the lack of volunteer hours from the graduating grade 12s. A lot of grade 12 students at our schools have not completed their required hours and say it's from the lack of resources. They're unaware of what places are currently allowing volunteers and what online ways they can get them. So to help, the West Region senators will be gathering a list of resources and places in person and online that are accepting volunteers and bring them back to our next Senate meeting in the hopes to send out a list to all the high schools in the region to access.
In the Northern Regional Breakout, we discussed student mental health and well-being. In efforts of supporting the mental wellness of North Durham students, the Regional Breakout started the planning stages of our project, The Ins and Outs of Finding Help. Undoubtedly, there are many resources available to students to seek help for their mental health and well-being. It is a matter of making these resources accessible to students and educating them on what finding help truly means and truly looks like. The purpose of this resource is to paint a clearer picture of how students can access and seek help. The resource will answer the 5 W's of finding help: the who, the what, the where, the why, the when, and the how.
Now we would like to share our regional updates, which is separate from our regional breakouts within Senate. So this month, the most concerning issue brought to me by West Region students has to do with sports. Excited and grateful that sports are allowed to return, they're concerned about the fact that games are always at the same time in the day. Since our course schedule does not switch weekly anymore, this means that they're always missing the same class, which drastically affects their learning opportunities, and feel that alternate weeks for courses, especially if we return to semesters, would be a good way to balance sports and school.
There have been some positives and some negatives for the East region. Many schools are getting festive with Halloween-themed decorations, costumes, and events, and student participation has been on high display as they show their school spirit. However, there are some students who are still experiencing some issues with the new school year. Some students say that the amount of schoolwork that they receive is too much considering the ending time for school and their personal responsibilities. Finding a way to accommodate this issue is essential since the mental health of students can be impacted.
These past few weeks have been insurmountably difficult and challenging for North Durham students, staff, educators, and community members, especially those of Brock Township. As many of you may already know, there was a tragic accident that unfortunately resulted in the injuries of many students, as well as the tragic loss of one student from Brock High School. Although it is very difficult to support students and staff during challenging times such as these, students are continuing to seek help and counseling provided by the Durham District School. I'd like to extend my thankfulness and gratitude to the Brock High School administrative team for their hard work and devotion to supporting students during this difficult time. Additionally, I would like to extend my deepest sympathies to the family, friends, and individuals impacted by this tragic occurrence. I wish a speedy recovery to all students injured and will continue to work alongside North Durham to support the community during this ongoing situation.
Lastly, James DeMario and I recently created a student trustee and student senate introduction video that will be sent to the high schools within Durham, as well as our elementary families of schools to be shown to the grades 6 to 8 classes to prepare them for our elementary conference that will be happening later this year.
This concludes our standing committee report. At this time, we would invite anyone to ask any questions they may have through the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for our student trustees tonight? Seeing none. Thank you very much, James, DeMario, and Kayla.
Sorry, I think there's two.
There's two hands up, sorry.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see that. Trustee Barnes, go ahead, Patrice.
You were motoring through this. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the student trustees. It is it's very powerful hearing the voice of students at the table and concerns that are coming forward directly from students that we need to consider as we go forward and plan for their academic year. So I want to thank you for being so involved and so detailed in the information that you're sending out. I'm also very pumped about the video going out to our elementary started in grade 6. I think that's an important piece as well to get students in our elementary schools to start thinking about student government and what that looks like. They're certainly capable, so I'm glad we're giving them that opportunity. So thank you again for such a detailed report and for supporting our students.
Thank you, Trustee Barnes. And Trustee Forbes, go ahead, Darlene.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you for the report. It was really insightful in the student voice, reporting back to what the students are really feeling and expressing to you. I think that's incredibly powerful. And I did have a question then, picking up on the sports piece, and I wouldn't mind knowing more about how scheduling and how that works, and if there is any way that we can accommodate so that students have, feel they can participate more. Thank you.
Am I allowed to speak?
Go ahead, Kayla.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So majority of West region, I know we did speak a little bit about it in the North region as well, but for the 5 high schools within the West region, I've just personally spoken to quite a few students and talked to their student government and student activity council presidents to find out more. And essentially what's happening is, for example, rugby girls, senior and junior, their games are always in the morning. So they're always missing their first period class, which doesn't switch weekly anymore like it used to in the past. It's always their homeroom class that they're missing. So if they have 2 games a week, that's a lot of school for 45 days that they're missing for one class. And because it's only 45 days, we're having tests maybe every week, which means that they're missing quite a bit of information for that one class. For boys soccer, for example, they have to leave in the middle of the afternoon every time they have a game. So what I've been hearing is if it was switching weekly like it used to back in 2019, it wouldn't be as much of an issue because it would be alternating classes that they would have to catch up in instead of just a lot of work in one class, especially because we have only 45 days for a course instead of 5 months.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. I'm just wondering if someone would like to comment. Go ahead, Director.
Thanks very much, Chair Thatcher, and really appreciate, like everyone else, the student trustees' concerns in terms of what's working well and then what isn't working well. We did do analysis in terms of the number of classes that students are missing this semester, recognizing that in a quadmester, it is a different setup. We did last year do a flip from morning to afternoon, and that was something that was related to just last year. It wasn't previous practice because the afternoons were virtual. And so because of the game schedule this year, students are actually missing less classes than they would have regularly because we've put more space between the games. But that's not to say there isn't a concern from the student perspective in terms of the flip days. So that is something, and Superintendent Nevels, I don't know if you want to I know that Superintendent Nevels is actually bringing a report forward to trustees in 2 weeks in terms of athletics. But Superintendent Nevels, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything more, given that we've heard the students' concerns.
So definitely, as Director Marsh had shared, we have limited the number of games within the season to try to compensate for a little bit of what the students are feeling in terms of less games within the fall season. But it is definitely something we can take to our administrators in terms of the flip between the morning and the afternoon. It just compounds the students would have to follow that flipping schedule as well as our educators, but it's something we can definitely take away and look at to support with this.
The only thing that it may present a concern is if we have staffing where sometimes people are employed for a half day only and then they're employed elsewhere for the other half day. And so that would be our one concern would be whether or not we could do it operationally, but we're going to explore it. I think it's fair to say.
Thank you for the question, Trustee Forbes. And Kayla, did you have anything more to add?
No, that's everything. Thank you.
Excellent. I don't see any further comments or questions here. So I'll move on to item B and call on Superintendent Heather Mundy to discuss the workforce census.
Thank you. And through you, Chair Thatcher. The report can be found on pages 1 through 4 of your package. Understanding who our employees are is important as we continue to center Indigenous rights and human rights in our work. In 2017-2018, Ddsb developed and administered the We Are Ddsb Workforce Census. Since the administration and reporting of the workforce census was completed, a new regulation, the Anti-Racism Directorate's data standards, were passed in April 2018. Given these new requirements, the previous workforce census will need to be reviewed and updated. With this in mind, we plan to administer the workforce census in February-March of 2022. The information gathered through the analysis of the 2022 workforce census and our 2018 data will assist in reviewing our recruitment practices, as well as supporting ongoing professional development for our staff. That is our report tonight, and we're happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments for Superintendent Mundy? I'm seeing none. So I'll move on then to item C and call on Superintendent Georgette Davis to present the C.E. Broughton modified calendar update.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. This report can be found on pages 5 through 10 of your agenda package. The purpose of this report is to provide an update to the Board of Trustees on enrollment statistics and efforts to increase enrollment in the C. Broughton Modified Calendar. In the January 20th, 2020 board report, staff brought forward information of the projected CE Broughton enrollment and the corresponding recommendations. Trustees considered all input and passed resolutions that can be seen in section 3.1 on page 6 of your package. As a result of the resolutions, board reports were brought forward on April 6, 2020 and October 19, 2020. These reports outline the updated enrollment and the public relations effort implemented to increase enrollment, such as social media, IT updates, as indicated in section 3.2. These board reports are also included registration data. Since the April 6, 2020 report, we have continued with the social media promotion and posting posters at new developments. We also updated the School Finder Locator software on the board website to accurately reflect the C. Broughton modified calendar area. As of October 31st, 2021, the CE Broughton calendar enrollment is 126 students. Please see details of the 5-year projected enrollment in section 4.1 on page 7 of the package. Section 4.1 also includes tables 1 to 3, which outline class sizes and enrollment numbers in the modified and regular calendars. Although we are unable to determine at this time what effect, if any, the pandemic may have had on the enrollment of the modified calendar for the 2021-2022 school year, we can confirm that the C. Broughton modified calendar enrollment increased by 22 students. Please see the breakdown in table 2 on page 8 of this package. This report is brought to trustees at their request for information and to monitor the enrollment at C. Broughton. That concludes the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Superintendent Davis. I wonder if I could begin with a question with regards to the enrollment projections. I'm just wondering if you could outline the rationale for the projections over the next few years, given the fact that we're a growing board, as we've determined, and not only that, but that much of our growth at the moment is the western portion of Whitby. 3 of our schools are holding schools, elementary holding schools, with portables at the moment, and additional portables at the moment. So I'm just wondering if you could provide some rationale. I see that this year over year, this year to next year, there is a projected decrease of 10% student enrollment. So that would be my question, Superintendent Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to answer, and I will also invite Associate Director Wright if he has anything to add as well. So the projections that we do are the official enrollment projections. They are contingent upon the students that we already have in the school. So we look at the students who are there and we go through giving a little wiggle room for additional enrollments into the program. But when we look at the projections, we look at the grade 8s who are transitioning, and we look at the possible kindergarten over time that do enter into the school. There are opportunities for a little wiggle room, but these are the criteria that we use in terms of the projections.
Thank you. I'll call on Trustee Lundquist. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. So I have several questions, and I'll try to keep my questions sort of succinct because I'm a little bit puzzled by this report, I have to admit. And I'm puzzled because it doesn't make sense to me. So I'm worried about a couple of things. So I'm worried that, like, I know 22 students doesn't sound like a lot, but that was in the course of a pandemic, and it's 20% of the program. So that is not an insignificant growth. Like, that actually is significant, particularly because some of the steps that were taken weren't taken till later. So I remember Mr. Hygo coming to the board indicating that that drop-down menu wasn't showing Broughton as an option, and then that was remedied. But that wasn't that long ago. It certainly wasn't more than a year ago. Although I say that now and I'm a little concerned because we've been in a pandemic and maybe I'm wrong. So, but that being said, what puzzles me about it is if you look at where the growth is, it's in JKSK, right? That's 15 extra students. And that's what I would expect, who we would mostly attract, because you know, most parents don't want to move their children school to school if they don't need to do so. So I would like somebody to comment on why we don't anticipate that kind of growth in JKSK first, because that doesn't make a ton of sense to me, right? We did it 1 year in the midst of a pandemic. Why would we not be able to replicate
that? Go ahead, Associate Director Wright.
Thanks very much, through you, Madam Chair. It's difficult to look at 1 year and try and predict and trend out. So I would say that we're still caught in a cycle largely based on historical trendings and retention rates, I think, as Superintendent Davis was implying. So we did try and highlight in the report that it's difficult for us to predict with the pandemic if what we're seeing is an anomaly or if it will grow into a trend. So the report as it's presented to you this evening is really just information. We're not trying to wrap an opinion around it, just presenting data to you as was requested from trustees. We certainly did note that there is growth in the JK and SK grades, and we were still trying to figure out whether it will lead to a trend or whether it is just due to the pandemic. Thanks.
May I have a supplementary, please, Chair Thatcher?
Yes, go ahead, please.
So one of the things that I'm puzzling over are the numbers. So in this sense, and I'll try to describe this briefly. We have 126 students. Some are in Ddsb at home, but there are 126 in this modified program at Broughton. If you collapse that program, I believe it was 81 students that would be from out of area. So they are not likely to attend Broughton. So we're going to lose 81 students out of that school. Does that impact the feasibility of keeping Broughton open at all? That is worrisome to me a little bit, you know, to lose that kind of potential population in a school. What would our plan be if that was the case?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So on, there is also another chart that does show, and it's in 4.3, that the regular classroom, it shows the regular program numbers as well. So there's approximately 233 students that are in the regular program, as well as the modified program in the school as well. So there are the dual programs that are there.
No, I understood that, Superintendent Davis. I guess, if I may, like, I've looked at this in significant detail. So any way you cut it, there are 80 some students from out of area attending the school in the modified program. And we don't really know if those students would continue to go to that school if they're not able to access modified. I presume some would not, and maybe all would not. I have, you know, that would be purely speculative, and I recognize that. But that's approximately a quarter of the school. That is a really significant number, and I'm just wondering if we've actually turned our mind to that possibility at all, and what that might mean for the school, if anything.
Through you, Chair Thatcher, I may start, and then people will build on it.
Yes.
Thank you. So we did have that conversation. What are the implications in terms of if at some point the trustees determined that the modified calendar at the school wasn't going to move forward? And so you'll notice, for example, under financial implications, we didn't suggest that there's necessarily a financial cost in terms of the teaching staff, because we recognize that if the students who are within that catchment area chose to attend that school, there might be additional classrooms provided to accommodate the difference. So we have those who are out of area who wouldn't be there. from a programming perspective, it actually streamlines the staffing for the school. And it also continues to be a financial savings in terms of the additional, not that it's hugely significant, but the costing that we need to do in terms of having a vice principal available and the CERT available and other sort of operating costs when we go with the modified calendar. In terms of the actual capacity at the school, which I think is what you're getting at, would we then come back to trustees and say, this school's at X capacity and therefore isn't feasible? I think that we would have to, in terms of take it into context of the entire area of where C. Broughton is, whether or not some boundary reviews would address changes in growth patterns, so that if there were a regular calendar there, then it might be that we have other strategies in terms of filling the school up. And Associate Director Wright, I'm not sure if you have any further information from an accommodation perspective in terms of the capacity of the sites neighboring C. Broughton, but we certainly had the conversation, Trustee Lundquist. There wasn't the sense that it would be then coming back to you saying the school's highly under capacity and we think it's in trouble in terms of we don't have room to put these students somewhere else, right? We are growing. It would just be whether or not new students in, we might adjust boundaries depending on development. And Associate Director Wright, you might have more to add there.
Thanks very much, Director Marsh, and through you, Madam Chair. We did look at the utilization of the schools surrounding CE Broughton. There's a little bit of a mix, but generally fairly full. I mean, directly to answer your question, if we lost 80 students out of CE Broughton, it would significantly decrease the utilization, but because of the growth in the area, certainly we do have the potential of looking at CE Broughton as a future holding school or to accommodate other sort of mixed growth in the area.
Thank you. And so I know I'm only allowed to ask 2 and I have 1/3 question, so I'll just put it on hold and hope that you will come back to me if there is time.
I'll come back to you, Trustee Lundquist, and go to Trustee Templeton. Go ahead, Scott.
Actually, I just want to reiterate that we had 21% growth of attendance in this, and that's everything's been touched on that I was going to touch on. The 16.9 for students in JK increase. My one question was, do we have the actual date that the program was fixed for enrollment on from online?
I'm going to, through you, Chair Thatcher, I'll begin and then ask Superintendent Davis to continue to respond. So I think that I think there may be some difference of opinion in terms of when the program was actually fixed online. And so I think it's fair to say that it was possible to see C. Broughton in the drop-down menu, and it may have been depending on how someone was trying to approach the drop-down menu. But I know the evening when it was reported to us that it wasn't working, there were others who were able to get that to work. So it speaks to me that there must have been some confusion in terms of how it was being accessed, which again was a concern though, if you're trying to access it from the public and it didn't seem to be dropping down what was going on there. But certainly in recent correspondence, there's no indication that that is an issue. And Superintendent Davis, you probably recall the date of that meeting, but at that time, I think we would say that it seemed to be working for the most part, but obviously some confusion still within the public, which we acknowledge.
Thank you, Director Marsh. And just to be clear that we had updated it a year prior, and it was working. After that incident, we double checked it with IT just to make sure that those pieces were up to date. But to answer your question, Trustee Templeton, that was updated a year prior from 2020, as soon as we started our promotion process. And that was with IT and facility services.
Supplemental, Trustee Templeton?
No, I'm good with that.
Okay, just wondered if I could just jump in for a moment and hope Trustee Lundquist, I'm not stealing your question, but it was mentioned here that some of the calendar classes are staffed under the Ddsb class size averages. And I actually pulled off reports for some of the other Whitby schools in the general vicinity. It's not uncommon to have certain areas in schools, especially schools that are below capacity and underutilized. The one number, I guess, that jumps out is the grade 3-4 split with 16, when the junior classes, the primary classes, would be 19. And I guess what I thought of there was that it really wasn't something that disturbed me greatly for several reasons. First of all, we have a split class that crosses 2 divisions, primary, junior. And secondly, we have preparation for EQAO there this year. So for those 2 reasons, I didn't consider that to be terribly serious. So just a comment around class sizes. I can certainly show you my research in that area as Superintendent Davis, should that be required. I'm going to go to Trustee Lundquist. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you. So I don't know if this is a question or a comment really, but it's one of the things that has bothered me about the report, and I was trying to put my finger on it and I couldn't quite grasp it because I know it's being presented as something neutral, but the challenge that I'm having is that when a program is created, it's created for a reason, right? There's a rationale behind it, and that can change, of course, and I understand all of that. But there, I don't see anything that expresses anything about the needs or the outcomes or anything about the programming itself and what it does and whether it works. So I know that there were many parents who commented that their children actually just needed that break. And without that kind of break, they expected that they would need more special education resources. And so there's a bunch of challenging questions around this. And when I look at a report that, is asking me to consider whether I want to get rid of a program, I understand that there is a sustainability question, right? I get that. And I understand that we have finite resources and we need to use our resources responsibly across the whole district. But I guess what I don't really understand is, are we only making this decision based on the economics of it, or are we really looking at the program and what the program does for families and the children in that school and in the system, and whether there is value that is added to their scholastic experience because maybe they couldn't thrive as well in a different kind of school. And I think that matters, so I'm in light of the potential for growth, I would like to see this extended 1 more year because of the pandemic, not 2. I think that even 1 more year of data would give us something comparable, really. But I worry about why we're not talking about the program itself, right? Not just the economics of it, but the program itself. Does it make sense? Does it add value? Does it create an educational experience that is important and necessary for families or kids? And I don't know the answer, but I think it's important when we're talking about potentially shuttering a program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Lundquist. Trustee Crawford, you had your hand up and you changed your mind, or did you lose your hand?
No, I changed my mind. I was going to get part of the discussion, but I think the trustees and the staff are handling it nicely. I'm getting educated here.
Thank you. Director March.
Thank you. I was just, I think the motion that the board passed was about us promoting the program and whether or not it would then improve enrollment. And so I think the board motion was for us to bring back enrollment reports to the Board of Trustees. In terms of the original report, when there was the efficacy in terms of what does this program mean for the families, I think that it's very hard to speak hypothetically about what would happen for those families in a regular calendar school year. And there's no way we could actually address that. We do know that when we looked at special education supports and attendance patterns and those sorts of things, this school did not stand out in terms of the success for students who have special education needs. And so that was part of the original discussion. But it's not to say that for these children, that it might have an impact, right? Because it would be hypothetical in that case. But in terms of board analysis, but in fairness to Superintendent Davis, the request was just to come back with enrollment reports in terms of the way that we're promoting the program. Is that going to change enrollment patterns, I think, with the ask of trustees.
And I just want, if I may, and I'm sorry for interrupting, Chair Thatcher, but this is important. I was not being critical of Superintendent Davis or the report. It just, this is a very important thing. And I think it's been a long time since we talked about it, and it may be that we just need to refamiliarize ourselves with the initial report to look at comparatively, because it seems to me like I'm hesitant about a whole lot here, but you know, mostly because there is an increase, but I also am worried about what we're looking at and what we're not looking at. And so maybe it is there and I just need to go back and look. So if that's the case, I'm happy to do that. But if we're bringing it back to the agenda, it may be important to re-release the initial report because the public won't remember it either if we don't.
And also, we did speak to the fact that there were quite a large number of special needs students, students in the spectrum who found that the calendar was very helpful to them in that the breaks were more frequent. So that was one of the things that did come out of the original report. I want to go over to Trustee Forbes. Go ahead, Darlene.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do appreciate all of the conversation that's just happened. And I do think that the efficacy of the program, having information about that and not just quantitative data, but also that qualitative data, right? Because student well-being is really at the center of what we're really trying to achieve, as well as academics. So, and I know that's a little more difficult because we can't just run and crunch the numbers. But I also think that not only would that be beneficial for trustees, but it might and also help with the social media campaign because, or the enrollment to increase enrollment for the modified program. It could be beneficial for parents to understand how the modified program helps, you know, has benefited, if it has, right, the well-being of the students who attend it.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. And to Trustee Templeton, go ahead, Scott.
I just wanted to speak about as a parent, because my daughter did go to the modified and that program helped her in the long run. She couldn't handle everything in a short term. She had to spread it out through the year, and it really helped with her mental health and her well-being all the way down the road. And that's why I really support this modified program.
Thank you, Scott. And Chair Morton, go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. I'm curious to know about the modified program at Winchester. Is it open to many students, or is that program already filled?
I'm not sure if that was part of the report.
No, it was not.
But I'm not sure, Superintendent Davis, if you're able. I know the Winchester program is basically the community of Brooklyn. It draws from that community, whereas the Broughton draws from basically anywhere in the board. But as far as the numbers for Winchester, I don't have those handy.
But the
That would be,
report did say that any students who were eliminated, if we were to eliminate that program for Broughton, they could go to Winchester. That was part of the presentation.
That's correct.
Madam Chair, would you like me to respond?
Yes, go ahead.
So absolutely, in terms of that, we were focused on C. Broughton because of the declining enrollment and the projections. Winchester, that program is increasing in terms of numbers, and it is, as you've said, the Brooklyn area, and C. Broughton, that program is for the rest of the areas in the board, but we did put a recommendation that if the program was collapsed, that we would give an opportunity for the parents who choose to be able to register as out of area for Winchester. But right now their enrollment is just fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Davis. And Trustee Edwards, go ahead, Donna.
I just wanted to, thank you for the report, and that we did ask to monitor the enrollment, and that was our recommendation, because we did extend this for another year. But I'd just like to say, from a statistical point of view, 1 year of data doesn't establish a trend one way or the other. And that I know that we will have to go back and revisit this when it comes to, and probably the latest we can is in the early year, because we have to do, because our original motion was only for to extend it for 2 years, which basically ends this year. And I know we'll have to look at, but I'm just going to say thank you for the data. Appreciate it. But 1 year does not establish a trend.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. And Trustee Barrett. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Donna actually stole my thunder, because I was going to speak to the fact that although I have, I don't know the community, the three Whitby trustees have represented their community well. I mean, I'm not as obviously familiar with it. But if you look at the numbers, there are some concerns with regards to 113 students with class sizes of 8 and 10 and 11. But however, like, I would suggest that I would agree with Trustee Edwards that one data point does not a trend make. That's good statistical process control. Don't teach that at work. So you've got to have more data points. And some of that data might be those JK and SK. Are they brand new people to the program, or are they siblings? That too would be a good indication of whether or not you're being able to attract, other people as well. Because if you do look at the numbers, as mentioned, the 19 and 11, would then indicate. However, it would be an 8-year road to, work that through the system. But I would agree with Trustee Edwards. The data has been presented as requested, and I do appreciate that. It's only 1 year of data. It's kind of like French immersion this year. I always work French immersion to this. French immersion numbers are down this year. I would suggest that's not a trend. That's an aberration, as we are in the middle of COVID, and it's very difficult to determine what's normal, because we haven't had normal for 19 months. So, but anyway, Trustee Edwards stole my thunder again. So thank you, Chair Thatcher.
Thank you. And Director Marsh.
Thanks, through you, Chair Thatcher. I think just to build a little bit more on what Trustee Edwards and Trustee Barrett were saying, the program doesn't disappear in the 2-year period. We had brought forward a report suggesting that the program be collapsed, and the trustees said they wanted 2 years worth of data, so we could carry on with the program with no motions coming from the Board of Trustees. And I wonder if it might be wise to delay any further analysis until we're post COVID, and then we're able to bring something to you that would then capture potentially several years from the original report, but also have life a little bit more regular in terms of COVID management. So that's a thought as well, that no action at this time, but at a future date, the trustees make a motion in terms of getting an update on it, in terms of, has it had time to change, or are we still seeing smaller class size averages here?
Yes, thank you, Director Marsh. I think that's kind of what we're saying. And the class sizes are not 8 and 11 or 9 and 7, but the class sizes are on page 8 in the report, section 4.3, 19, 22, 26. You'll see them down the right-hand side. I just wanted to reiterate that. Is there anyone with any further questions or comments? Not seeing any. Director Marsh, I think that was a good suggestion that you had, that we just hold off on making any kind of a motion at this point in time until we determine. 1 year does not a trend make for sure, but I believe that was indicated by Associate Director Wright that it could very well be, and given the fact that we've had the disruption to our routines for the last 18, 19 months, it would be I think a wise direction for us. So I don't think there's anything then for us to motion or to discuss further. So I'm going to move on then to Trustee Barnes and ask for the OPSPA report. Patrice.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. There is nothing to report today, so we can move on from that item.
Thank you. And then I'll call on Trustee Linda Stone for the Governance and Policy Committee report of September 27th. Linda?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, the report can be found, the two reports, they're amended minutes, September 27th, May 10th, from pages 11 to 17. And at our last meeting, we, staff and trustees, did discuss the upcoming human rights policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Section 11, we have 3 letters there in our correspondence section. As there is no further business, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn tonight. Thank you, Trustee Templeton, and seconder, Trustee Lundquist. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.